After almost 2 years of development, countless updates, multiple prototype revisions, and more changes than I can even keep track of, MM-02 Optimus Prime is finally finished. Magnificent Mecha has officially confirmed that this is a final version of MM-02. The flame decals still need to be added, but there will be no more change to the figures, and is now ready to move into mass production. And honestly, I'm really glad we finally have this confirmation, because MM-02 has been one of the most interesting Bayverse projects to follow precisely because we've been able to watch this evolve in real time. We have seen the proportion change, we've seen the head sculpt completely transform, we have seen the paint improve, we have seen new accessory added, we have seen articulation refined, we have seen the jet wing system announced, and now, after all of that, this is the version that Magnificent Mecha is actually going to produce. So today, I want to go through this final revision, take a closer look at the new paint and molded details, talk about the matrix and weapon updates, compare the final MM-02 with the latest version of Unique Toys UTR-10, and most importantly, now that we're finally looking at the finished design, was the way worth it? Let's start with the vehicle mode, because this is probably one of the most immediately noticeable improvements. Magnificent Mecha has finally shown the new paint job for both MM-02A and MM-02B, and I'm really happy to see that they decided to incorporate chrome into the truck mode. Specifically, now we have chrome on the front grille and a few tanks on both sides, and honestly, this makes a bigger difference than you might expect. MM-02 already had an incredibly accurate truck mode, but the large red and blue surfaces could sometimes make the vehicle look a little flat. Adding these metallic areas immediately gives the truck more contrast. The grille becomes a much stronger focal point, the fuel tanks stand out, and the entire vehicle starts looking much more like a premium movie prop. It also gives MM-02 a similar kind of premium visual treatment to what we have seen from Unique Toys with UTR-10 that have a lot of chrome parts. And I think that's a very welcome addition. I'm not saying MM-02 needed to copy UTR-10 paint job, because these figures clearly have different design philosophy. But when you're making a premium Bayverse Optimus Prime at its scale, these metallic details matter. You're dealing with a huge vehicle mode, and the more large uninterrupted surfaces you have, the more important things like chrome, paint variation, and small molded details become. And the longer exhaust help with that as well. They give the truck mode a more substantial silhouette and make the rear section feel more complete. But the robot mode has changed too. And this is where the final version gets really interesting. Because Magnificent Mecha didn't just give MM-02 a new coat of paint and call it finished. They made a number of changes to the actual molded details and proportion. The shoulder pad has been redesigned, the new shoulder armor has more curved appearance, and is slightly longer, which brings the silhouette closer to the movie design. The ankle wheels have also been made slimmer, and underneath the lower legs, Magnificent Mecha actually removed some of the lower shin material to allow the ankle to pivot farther forward. That might sound like a relatively minor change, but I think this is one of the more important revisions. Because for figures like MM-02, articulation isn't just about having a huge number of joints, it's about whether those joints can actually let you graduate the pose that we see in the movies. The ankle range is incredibly important for that. If you can't bring the foot forward far enough, Optimus can have excellent articulation everywhere else and still feel surprisingly restricted. So giving the ankle more forward movement is a genuinely useful improvement. But then we get to one of the most interesting changes. The front wheel fenders have been revised and brought closer forward toward the ankle area. And when you look at the final design, they almost resemble the piston mechanism. Now, I don't want to overstate this because we still don't know exactly how functional those parts are, but the placement makes sense for an engineering perspective. The wheels and ankle have to move across different planes when the ankle is rotated deeply. So having these components move with the assembly could potentially have maintained the correct relationship between the wheels and the ankle. And if that's part of the reason they redesigned this area, that's actually a pretty clever solution to a difficult engineering problem. We also have changes to the outer cap armor, the inner cap panel, which now looks less curved and less angular. The front proportion of the tires have been revised as well, correcting details that didn't probably match the movie design. The headlight on the front of the waist have been enlarged. They are also changed around the outer elbow armor, and the tire wheels appear smaller compared to some of the earlier prototype images. Whether that's an actual size reduction or simply a difference in how the previous prototype was transformed is something I'm still not completely sure about. But at this point, that's less important to me than the overall result. Because when you put the original and the final version next to each other, you can see how much work Magnificent Mecha has actually put into these figures. So, are the changes noticeable? And this is where I think we need to be honest. Not every individual revision is going to make you look at MM-02 and immediately think, wow, that's completely different. Some of these design changes are very subtle, a slightly different shoulder shape, a slimmer wheel, a revised cab panel, a different tire details, a little more ankle range, and a longer exhaust. None of those things individually transform MM-02, but that's not really the point. The question is whether all of these small refinements make the final figures better as a whole. And personally, I think they do. The final version looks cleaner, proportions feel more deliberate, the molded details are more consistent with the movie design. The truck mode has more visual depth, and the engineering seems to have been refined specifically around some of the areas that matter most for posting and transformation. This is a kind of improvement that's difficult to appreciate if you're only looking at the newest prototype by itself. But when you put it next to the early version, that's when the development really becomes obvious. And that's actually what makes MM-02 so fascinating. We have had the opportunity to watch these figures evolve instead of simply seeing the final product. And speaking of the final design, now we have the final look of Magnificent Mecha in comparison to the latest version of Unique Toys UTR-10. And I know that UTR-10 is still not finished here, but this is the latest version we can compare to. And I think this comparison is fascinating because it demonstrates two very different approaches to Bayverse engineering. UTR-10 is incredibly complex, there's no denying that. There's an enormous amount of engineering packed into that figure. But one thing I've noticed looking at this comparison is that more complicated does not necessarily mean more accurate looking. When you look at areas like the forearms, the hips, and even the blue panels behind Optimus' head, UTR-10 can sometimes have a much more obvious toy appearance. Meanwhile, MM-02 has a much smoother and cleaner visual language. And personally, that's one of the things I like about MM-02. It doesn't feel like Magnificent Mecha is trying to show off how complicated the engineering is. They try to hide it, and they try to make all of those transforming parts disappear into something that looks like a movie character. And that's an important distinction, because when I look at a Bayverse Optimus Prime, I don't necessarily care how many moving parts or hidden parts inside the torso. I care whether the finished robot looks like Optimus Prime. And the MM-02 has always been particularly strong in that area. It looks clean, it looks smooth, it looks cohesive. And now that we're finally looking at a version that actually going into production, I think the design philosophy is even more apparent. Of course, the final MM-02 isn't just about the molded details. Magnificent Mecha has also continued refining the accessory and functionality. One of the newest updates finally shows how the matrix of leadership is stored inside the Optimus chest, and I absolutely love this kind of details. Instead of simply giving you a matrix accessory that you can put somewhere on the figures, Magnificent Mecha actually integrated the matrix chamber into the chest in a way that recreates what we see in the movies. It's another one of those little details that make MM-02 feel like a representation of the actual character rather than just another Optimus Prime toy. And then there's the weapon. The dual energon hook can now be used as handheld weapon. The dual energon sword can also be used in the hands. And I think that's a really welcome addition, because these aren't just accessories that you put on the shelf and forget about. Giving them handheld functionality means you have a much more freedom when posting Optimus Prime. You can mix and match configuration, and you can create different action poses. You can get more mileage out of the accessories that are already included. This is especially interesting for MM-02B because the Darker Moon version has so many iconic weapon configurations, especially the handheld energon sword. So, having additional ways to display those weapons makes MM-02B feel even more versatile. Now we finally get into the question I've been asking throughout this entire video. Was all of this worth the wait? Honestly, I think it depends on what you expected from MM-02. If you just wanted a good looking transforming Bayverse Optimus Prime, then yes. The development has probably felt painfully long. There have been so many updates and revisions, and that's easy to look at another change and think, just release the thing already. And I completely understand that point. But if the goal was to create one of the most ambitious and accurate transforming Bayverse Optimus Prime possible, then I think that this revision makes a lot of sense. Because Magnificent Mecha wasn't just changing things for the sake of changing them. They were addressing specific problems. The shoulder were refined, the thigh were corrected, the ankle range was improved, the wheels and the surrounding engineering was revised, the cap details were cleaned up, the exhaust was extended, the truck received additional paint and chrome, the matrix was integrated, the weapon became more versatile. None of this change alone would justify nearly 2 years of development, but together, they create a noticeably more polished final product. And now we finally have the most important piece of information. There are no more changes. This is it. Magnificent Mecha has confirmed that MM-02 is finished and ready for mass production. And honestly, I think that's a pretty satisfying place for this project to finally reach. But there's still one more thing. Of course, Magnificent Mecha MM-02 itself might be finalized, but the story about MM-02 isn't necessarily over. Magnificent Mecha has teased that more photos of their Jetfire set or Jet Power Prime will be coming. And after seeing how much effort went into refining this base figure, I'm extremely curious to see what they have done with that set. Because now we can finally look at Jetfire without wondering whether the base Optimus is going to change again. We know what the final MM-02 will look like. We know the proportion are locked. We know the engineering is locked. We know the paint is being finalized. So whatever Magnificent Mecha shows us next, we finally be looking at the expansion of the finished platform, and that could be very interesting. So after following MM-02 for almost 2 years, it's honestly a little strange knowing that we're finally looking at the final version. We have seen these figures go through so many stages. We have watched proportion change, we have watched the head sculpt evolve, we have watched the paint improve, we have watched new accessory appear, we have watched the articulation getting refined, and now that's all finished. Personally, I think the final version looks fantastic, and the chrome makes the truck look much more premium. The revised shoulder armor and molded details make the robot mode look cleaner. The slimmer ankle wheels and additional ankle range should make the posting more convincing. The longer exhaust improve the truck silhouette and also the robot silhouette. The matrix integration add another red movie specific detail. And the new handheld weapon configuration make the figures more versatile. Are every single revision immediately noticeable? Probably not, but I don't think they need to be. The real improvements is the final package, and when I look at the final MM-02 next to the earlier version, it's pretty incredible how far this project has come. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think the final revision will worth the delay? Which one do you think captured the Bayverse Optimus Prime design better, MM-02A or MM-02B? And now that MM-02 is officially locked for mass production, how do you think the final design compared to Unique Toys' latest UTR-10? Which one do you think captured the Bayverse Optimus Prime design better? And are you planning to picking up MM-02A or MM-02B or both?